Hello. I have one that I want to watch today because I watched it for the first time in a really long time not too long ago, and I want to watch it again. It's one of the better made, under the radar 90s. I guess this was made in the 2000s, so it's just on the edge. I'll give it to it because it was shot in the 90s. It's like just at the end of this like glorious era of just these like under the radar no name movies that like for some reason everybody was in, and it's like people that had bigger careers than they should be acting like they're better than these movies, but for whatever fucking reason I love them. I cannot get enough of them. There's a lot of like 90s gangster movies like that, and like fucking all over the fucking place. There's just these films that are underrated gems. Like my buddy Josh from Louisiana, he showed me this movie called Love in a 45. I believe it is. Yeah, Love in a 45, and it's got like everybody. It's got a lot of like good actors in it. Like it kind of is in the zeitgeist of like the Quentin Tarantino films and like that kind of thing. Like Real Smooth Criminals doing real smooth criminal stuff. This is a little more clunky. The film's called The Way of the Gun. It's got Benicio del Toro in it, and I forget the other guy, but I know it's a guy that was tortured relentlessly on the Eric Andre show. I'm fucking blanking on his fucking name right now, and it's about to like usually Amazon Prime pops these up, but yeah, it's free on Prime, and I fucking love it. It's got probably one of the best like first 5 minutes like of a film. It's not particularly engaging, but just the fucking vocabulary used. It's like, fuck, I forgot how good fucking writing used to be. Like he knows it's kind of a shitty movie off the bat, but it's like, all right, we're just gonna take it to that level. We're gonna put the bar right fucking here, and that's where we're gonna start, and that's where like it's so perfect, so fucking perfect. But yeah, I'd like to spend a minute talking about Kevin Smith. Yeah, I don't know why. I feel like I have to acknowledge the elephant in the room. That is Kevin Smith. I'm a big fucking fat fucking. God damn it. That wasn't a good one. No, I wanted to talk to you. I've been watching a lot of these 90s movies, and yeah, like I haven't watched Clerks yet. I haven't even really acknowledged that I worked on a Kevin Smith movie. I mean, I think I actually, wait a minute. Yeah, I did. What am I fucking talking about? I've talked about fucking working on a Kevin Smith movie a whole bunch. I worked on Jay and Silent Bob reboot, which is going to be a later episode down the road, probably with Mark. I'm going to try and get him on that because I want to tell him about things I did. But yeah, like Kevin Smith, like was right in the middle of this like. He kind of like made indie films what they were like he held indie films to the standard where it didn't feel like you're watching art house, and I like that. His films were very good. Clerks, Mallrats, and Chasing Amy. Like we can stop there. I guess Good Will Hunting as well. He produced that, him and Scott Mosier. Yeah. I just kind of want to like point something out. Kevin Smith has become officially a parody of himself at like almost like a Charlie Kaufman-esque like just he's become such a fucking pussy because of his celebrity status, and I don't understand. Like, he's from New Jersey, so I assume he has some kind of like edge, but like weirdness in an aggressive way, and it's like something that you only really get in Jersey and New York, a little bit in Philly, a little bit down south, but you get like these dorks that were like like just absolute nerds in fucking high school and like or beyond that. Like you get these like dudes, it's like they play Dungeons and Dragons and they fucking are just like absolute fucking creation. Wow. Whoa. What the fuck? The fuck word was I going for there? I was gonna say cretins and creatures. So creature. Yeah, that's a good one. Mushmouth. No, like you get these absolute like fucking Philistines that are like, you know, they're savvy at a couple of things, but they're like, you know, socially awkward. So they're like, but then all of a sudden it's like they get out into the real world and things are kind of like they find lifting weights and like reading a little bit different than their wheelhouse, and like all of a sudden they're like, you know, just these like alpha fucking weird, like, not alpha's not the right word, just like aggressive, like a fucking aggressive nerd, like, I don't fucking. So Kevin Smith has always kind of struck me as that. There's always been like a kind of like arrogant and like a very in your face tone with his movies, and Clerks included. Like, it's not a violent film, but it does have this kind of like just it fucking edge to it, and like it was an edge where it was like verbally very abusive, verbally very, you know, its own brand of comedy, a very cerebral comedy for what it was at the time. I mean, I'm not saying it's brilliant. I mean, it's brilliant. I mean, give it credit where credit's due. It's a very groundbreaking film. It was very brilliant, very poignant for the time. Very, it encapsulated a lot of things at the moment, but it was done very eloquently, despite being a film where like one of the punchlines is like 37 dicks, like. It is what it is, but it had a certain like tonality to it where it wasn't just like silly and childish, but it was like, it was smart. It was very verbally, you know, something else. And then you get Mallrats, where you also get this like kind of like, it's, you know, not quite as poignant, but like you have these very well-spoken dorks that throughout the film just get into fucking confrontations with people for seemingly no reason. Chasing Amy is kind of like a little more dialed back, but you know, like there is like this kind of like aggression with the lesbianism of it, and like I don't mean like lesbians are aggressive, but I mean it's like supposed to be like, you know, it's like the 90s, like people knew about things like that. It wasn't like complete total culture shock, but like if you weren't really like city centric, like I'm sure it was a little bit novel, not in like a bad way, of course, but like it was just like I didn't really know that expression until I was about like, you know, maybe 13 years old, and I grew up kind of sheltered, and I have an aunt that's a lesbian. I just had I was unfamiliar with it, so like I'm just saying at the time it probably was like kind of like an aggressive move to like, you know, just be like, yeah, like like as like it's like two chicks making out in like a mainstream movie, like, but like in an obnoxious way, like that's the effect for the scene. But like I'm doing a poor job of explaining this. Watch Chasing Amy and tell me what you think of the fucking scene with whatever her name is, Billy Joe Armstrong, Mary Jo Bloom, whatever. I'm running out of fucking names, but yeah, that chick that's in all of Kevin Smith's movies, that something Joe something or other. But yeah, nah, like keep this on fucking topic. So what I'm getting at right here with going off on Kevin Smith is there was this like tonality of the 90s where there was this just aggression, and he has lost his fucking touch. He does not do that anymore. He's just whining about fucking comic book related things, which I have no fucking bearing on, and he's just an annoyance. There was this this is one of those like tipping points where The Way of the Gun, that aggression that Kevin Smith's films used to have, that was like just it was its own thing. It was very direct and like to the point, but also eloquent. This is a little bit of a subversion of that, but I feel like that last fleeting bit of that, you know, it's not. It's in your face, but it's not like, you know, so in your face where it's a parody. It knows it's a parody of itself off the fucking bat, but like it's just to kind of set the tone. So it is like super over the fucking top. And then this film just kind of manifests into its own thing. And yeah, there's a really good fucking shootout at the end, which I would say is arguably probably like one of my favorite fucking cinematic shootouts. It takes a really long fucking time, which I dig. And it's like, it's not like particularly gory, but it's very visceral, and like, I'd say that word too fucking much. It's very very balanced and very realistic. It's very authentic. It has a very authentic feel to it, like that you would witness maybe in like a very desperate situation. Much like the violence in No Country for Old Men, although this is not quite as real as that. It's not quite Coen Brothers real, but it's its own fucking thing. So I'm gonna shut the fuck up, and we're gonna enjoy The Way of the Gun, and you can watch this with me on Amazon for fucking free. So please, without further ado, The Way of the Gun. Fuck yeah. The Way of the Gun. Fucking awesome movie. Oh man. I like movies like this because they're reminiscent of shit that I don't get to see anymore. There's just all this political correctly, it's just all shoehorned into a film that doesn't have any business having it. This film is like, it's like an archetype of a fucking era that is so bygone that, like, you gotta just sit back and appreciate it for what it is. If you don't know what I mean, I'm talking about these like mid studio, like kind of low to mid budget indie-ish films from the 90s. And I talked about it a lot up front. I was bashing Kevin Smith. So that's where I'm coming from. Like all these Miramax, all these Touchstone Pictures, all these Weinstein companies, like these Sony Picture Classics, these companies would put out movies like this because they were taking a risk. They were kind of like, hey, this isn't quite art house, this isn't quite indie, but this is something that probably a broader audience won't receive well. But we're gonna take a risk on it anyway and put it out. And sure enough, some of them are successful. Robert Rodriguez, Quentin Tarantino, Kevin Smith. All their work, fantastic. And they got where they are today because of people taking risks on them. This is kind of not one of them. I forget who the director was, but I figured it out. So it's got Benicio del Toro, Ryan Felipe, Sarah Silverman's in it for a second, but it's got that chick from Cape Fear, the chick that's pregnant in this. I can't fucking remember her name. And then fucking James Caan, from the fucking very old James Caan. Yeah. It's fucking great. It's one of those very pointlessly, like I wouldn't say needlessly, but it is like a film that is inconsequential to everybody involved except for one character, or I guess arguably two characters, but it's the two characters create one character, which is like kind of the point of it. There's a baby involved. There's a lady having a baby, so this but it's just like how many hitmen and kind of like gangsters and like just abhorrent people can we cram into one movie and then have all of them duke it out, all while a chick's giving birth in this like very like I don't even know where to start with this one. I don't want to just spend 20 minutes sucking this film's dick, but it's a great movie for a lot of reasons, and it's a film that I feel is like completely underappreciated. It's got a rather like well acted cast. It's it's not one of those like, oh, these are just like people you like. Like for example, let me compare this to a film that came out recently called Killing Them Softly. Killing Them Softly is a terrible movie, and it relies very heavily on that you like Brad Pitt and you think Brad Pitt is cool in the role of a gangster. That's all there is to it. Brad Pitt does not give a fuck about what you think. He does this for money. He's an actor. His job is playing dress up and staying in shape and kind of reading once in a while. That's all they're doing. So he doesn't care probably what you think. There is a passion behind it, I guess, but like ultimately, like no matter what, he knows that by him just being there, he's elevating the coolness factor of the movie. Now, 21 years ago, I'm sure that some people knew who Benicio del Toro was. He had done Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas at this point, which is pretty the Terry Gilliam adaptation of a Hunter S. Thompson film, or a Hunter S. Thompson novel. So people knew who he was, and he was in like The Usual Suspects, which came out before this as well. So he's like he was like a known actor. It's not like he just like came out of nowhere and was in this indie film. But this film is like kind of I would say beneath him. Like this wasn't like a pet project, but he probably needed some money. He probably wanted to continue working and continue justifying his SAG membership and whatnot. So he took a fucking low end role with Ryan Philippe, and they did this shit. But like their acting is like it's one of those ones where you could tell they really ultimately don't care much. Like they're not indifferent, but like they're having fun, and there's something about when you let people kind of like play dress up and do like a little cowboy and Indian gangster thing where they're allowed to kind of go to the odds and it. Like this film is very fulfilling. I will say that there's not one stone that's left unturned. And I love that about it too, is that it gives you a sense of completion at the end, even though it doesn't have an ambiguous ending, but it does have an ending that kind of is, for what it is open-ended. So I like that it kind of just starts in media res, as they call it, like in the middle of things. The characters are introduced by getting into an argument with Sarah Silverman and some guy she's with, and the most brilliant fucking line of the movie is, "Shut that cunt up before I fuck start her face," which is fucking hilarious. It's mwah. Mod on, is that a good way of a fucking, let me give you a little bit of that. That might be one of the greatest sentences ever uttered in the English language. Sorry, Shakespeare. But yeah, it just kind of is like this. It has 2 points, maybe 3. I forget. It has narration very like intermittently, very sparsely, which is good. You didn't need narration to explain this movie at all. It does a pretty good job doing exposition, and kind of showing you who the players are throughout all of it, even though ultimately the players are kind of like inconsequential, because it turns out like the baby and the lady having the baby and the doctor are ultimately like who they need to, but it facilitates this like very grandiose like shootout that spans multiple days and multiple locations, where the tension that is built throughout the film, it's like it's so mild in every like facet up until it actually culminates, and then everything is very tense and hostile. And having like what I referenced in the first part of this, having that aggressive attitude is kind of cool, and it functions really well in this film because you never know when that's going to happen. There are just these like moments of tension and moments of aggression where you don't know if it's going to boil over into something bigger, or you like, for example, here's a nice juxtaposition. The film, the first initial like kind of shootout car chase thing happens when they kidnap. I want to call her Tilda Swinton, but that's not even close to fucking accurate. The Cape Fear chick. She's at a maternity hospital. She's going to see her doctor, and Brad Pitt, fuck. I'm still tired. I'm a little tired, boy, today. Yeah, fucking Benicio and Ryan Felipe kidnap her, and then they get into a shootout at the hospital, in front of a bunch of people with a bunch of private security guys that are like kind of plainclothes officer looking guys, but they're just, they're private security. So they like there's this moment where after all of these other guys get like you hear the shootout going on, and then the pregnant chick is trying to figure out what to do. You hear it, you don't see it, and you're like, oh, it's gonna be one of those movies where it's very like, kind of like Reservoir Dogs. The violence implicit, but then no, they get into this kind of tense fucking car chase where they're constantly doing these like tactical maneuvers against one another and using the hostages that, like to their advantage, which ultimately like culminates in this like car accident where Ryan Felipe walks up and points the gun at Taye Diggs is in this too. Points the gun at Taye Diggs' face and just kind of like gives him like the, yeah, I could, you should knock it off. And then, that's where they go. So then the next point of action is they have the doctor show up in Mexico somewhere, and they like he pulls a gun, and they just brutally fucking fuck with him. It's one of those things where it's like, okay, so like they don't want to show you this like gratuitous violence quite yet, but then like these moments of like isolated violence like that are very real and very like uncomfortable. It's like it does a good job of like captivating you with this. And then they're like, as the film progresses, there's these like shootouts. There's a scene where this one dude's just playing Russian roulette with like a fucking pillowcase full of guns, which is fucking hilarious, but like also like, yeah, it kind of serves its purpose because he's friends with James Caan's character, and they kind of need each other to keep yet another party of people that are going to be kind of like, it's very well orchestrated, and it does not try to be smart. It does not try to be deceptive. The twist is adequate. It's perfectly like set up and delivers quite nicely on. it's a pleasant movie. It's a refreshing movie, and it's like just one of those ones where it's just at the end of this era. Like everybody romanticizes the 60s because like especially like just after watching Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Like everybody romanticizes like the mid to late 60s for being the studio because it was like this innocent time and everything was kind of positive. People were patriotic. You're coming out of the 50s where everybody was like very ultra like hyper American, and then like the 60s were kind of this like whoa, like we're gonna be American but in a different way, man. And then the studios tried to captivate that zeitgeist or capture that zeitgeist and like motivate the movie industry to capture that and encapsulate it in many ways. So like it like you get films like Woodstock or I guess like the Omega Man does a pretty good job of pointing that out. But yeah, that's one actually. I gotta get that back from fucking Allison. The everybody romanticizes that era. Personally, I think like 1992 to 2001 was just like the best era for filmmaking. I mean, like the 80s, they had fucking awesome movies. I love the 80s. I love 80s filmmaking. The 80s were good. John Carpenter, fucking Wes Craven, all these fucking dudes, fucking Alex Cox, fucking Paul Verhoeven, like all these fucking amazing directors coming out of the fucking woodwork. I guess Ridley and Tony Scott. Like they made all these really good movies. But then the 90s came around and it was like this fleeting trying to capture the megalomania of the 80s, but they had this different tone of American culture where everything was a little grungier and a little more like pessimistic. And it facilitated like kind of this resentment that like indie film encapsulated very well. But then you got kind of these like high end studio things like where it doesn't quite qualify as an 80s movie, but it doesn't quite qualify as like anything else. It's just like this weird fucking movie from the 90s. You got I got nothing. I got nothing. I'm tired. I'm a tired young man. But you should understand where I'm coming from with that. Like even fucking Eyes Wide Shut, I guess. What was his name? Kubrick. That came out in the 90s. Yeah, even that was just like, What, like, it's about the cabal and fucking shit, and who cares? Kubrick's wheelhouse was like Full Metal Jacket, Shining, fucking Space Odyssey, all the good stuff. Eyes Wide Shut, it's just Tom Cruise. Just an excuse to see Tom Cruise naked. That's fine. That's all you want. Go for it. Just watch Tom Cruise naked. But yeah, back to fucking The Way of the Gun. I got about 7 more minutes here. I want to talk about something that I do like about this film. That like something that really stands out too. There's something that in filmmaking, I don't know how aware people are of this. I know that there's like a meme about like the fourth wall. If you know anything about like the suspension of disbelief meaning you're believing everything that's going on in the diegesis, the universe of the film. You're suspending reality enough to engross yourself in the story and make it believable and want to know more. That's what suspension of disbelief is. So there's like these elements of filmmaking and artistry that are required to basically facilitate that you need to make suspension of disbelief viable. A couple of those things, like the fourth wall is like, everybody knows that. It's like there are 3 walls and then the pane of glass that is your television, known as the fourth wall. So when you break the fourth wall, it means you're like staring directly at the camera or staring directly at the viewer, which kind of breaks that suspension of disbelief. It grounds you in reality for a second, just enough to kind of jar you from the story, the narrative that is. So you're no longer part of the story. Now you're you're something completely different. You're not encapsulated in the movie. Your suspension of disbelief has been suspended. But there's like a couple of other things that are necessary. There's this thing called the 180 degree principle, meaning that if you were to like draw a line directly down the center of a room, let's say you were going to make something visually appealing for like, the stage or the screen or whatever, you would need to keep all of the direction of that film it needs to abide by this thing called the 180 degree principle. So you draw a straight line so that there's 180 degrees in which the camera is directed. Now, what that means is that you can shoot from one end of the room to the other as long as it does not go over on screen, that is, over that 180 degree line. Now you could do a full 180 degrees, so you could do like a point counterpoint. Like, let's say you're having a conversation and I have my back against one wall and my buddy has his back against the adjacent wall. You can turn the camera 180 degrees, but it needs to abide by that line. Like, if you're gonna do that, you need to give me 180 degrees of one side and 180 degrees of the other side to create what's called balance. Now, let's say you wanted to shoot like something like a sitcom where you have the 3 camera shoot, meaning that you have camera A right in the middle, that's your establishing shot, and then camera B and camera C are close-ups to mid shots, which create a conversationality. Those abide by the 180 degree principle too, but because it's a different camera setup and you don't have to do a 180 degree spin with the camera, all you need to do is draw that line and then keep the cameras kind of behind that line and pointed across from each other. And then if you really want to nitpick it too, you can go and trace where the direction of the camera lenses are going to be, so that make sure that every camera has a 90 degree crux from the one directly to its left, or actually it might be like 70 or something like that. I haven't done this fucking shit in forever. But yeah, you got to make sure that the camera A and the camera C have a 90 degree, and then I think there's like a 45. So you're basically abiding by the same thing, but you never want them to be crossing this 180 degree line. Now, I set that up to just explain this. The gunfight at the end of this fucking movie is one of the best fucking it's one of my favorite shootouts in cinema of all fucking time. It's as violent as it needs to be. It doesn't not every shot is just a kill shot. It's not every not every bullet is gonna make your fucking chest explode. It's a very grounded, pragmatic thing. These are hitmen. They're supposed to be somewhat tactically trained, yet there's these minor foul-ups that kind of ground you in reality to it. So I love that about it. The atmosphere of the shootout is so realistic. I mean, maybe not realistic. Like I said, I compared it to No Country for Old Men. That's as real as you can fucking get. The Coen brothers hit that fucking out of the park with how authentic that feels as a real fly on the wall to a shootout where nobody really knows what's going on, but they all have a shared objective. I just burped in the middle of that. I'm sorry. But this, it's the authenticity translates so fucking well because it's just it's real. I love the part where Felipe they're going for the money in the fountain at the very end, and he dives into the fountain and it's filled with broken bottles, and it there's something about that where it's that's something that he did the right thing. He was trying to create cover so that he could get closer, and he had the ability to not only take down the package, but he had to get there first and establish covering fire so that Benicio del Toro could move forward and help him out. But he dives into the fountain, it's covered in all these broken bottles. That's something that it's funny kind of and a little silly, but at the same time it's he did the right thing. But then that was an unforeseen circumstance that's very real, and I love it. I love it. But I bring up the 180 degree rule because I love the way the shootout might be drawn out for some people, but I love that it takes the time to establish just how long they're shooting at each other and how long it takes for them all to reload, and the kind of necessity it is to figure out where people are in a firefight. It gives you a very good sense of orientation as to who's doing the shooting and what's going on. And then I think it's done for comic relief, obviously, but they keep busting in on the chick giving birth, which is fucking hilarious to me. But it always kind of starts there and then will reset there, and then it fans out, and then there's even a point where they're kind of sitting there looking at the money going oh yeah, it's there's always free cheese in a mousetrap or something like that. Fucking nailed it. So yeah, The Way of the Gun. I got so much praise for this fucking movie. It's really a fucking great movie, and I hope that like, I hope I haven't ruined anything for you. I hope I inspire you to watch this movie more than anything. But yeah, it really is worth checking out. And it's just reminiscent of a bygone era. And hopefully, the 30-year cycle will kick in soon. And we're going to start having these brilliant fucking movies again where things are written properly and you're actually empathetic to the characters. So thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. And go watch The Way of the Gun on Amazon Prime. Amazon Prime. Amazon Prime.